He stood frozen before the billionaire's desk. A check worth $1 million gleamed under the light. Clean. Dangerous final. Take it, the man said coldly, and disappear from her life forever. Behind him she whispered, Dad, please. But her father's eyes cut like knives. Arav looked once at the girl who made him believe love could cross walls, then at the money that proved it couldn't. He tore the check in half. Sometimes love isn't lost. It's buried under pride. Life's lessons live inside stories. Subscribe so you never miss the next one. Arav had grown up inside the mansion, but never belonged to it. His mother, Maria, was the maid, the silent shadow who knew every corner, every secret. Arav learned early that in that world some people owned chandeliers. Others only cleaned the dust that fell from them. He was 12 when he first saw Elena Cole, the billionaire's daughter. She was sunlight wrapped in silk, laughing, free, untouchable. He was carrying cleaning buckets when she ran past him chasing a golden retriever. The dog knocked the bucket. Soap splashed over her expensive shoes. She gasped, "Oh my God!" Arav panicked. "I'm sorry, miss." But instead of shouting, she laughed. "Relax, it's just water." That laugh stayed with him. As years passed, they crossed paths again and again. Her in the light, him in the corners when she played piano. He'd stand outside the door just to listen. He'd whisper, "One day I'll play for her." Maria warned him softly, "Beta, never look at things that aren't meant for you." He smiled. Then why did God let me see them? One afternoon, the grand piano broke. Every technician failed. Arav quietly tried, fingers tracing the mechanism, and fixed it. Elena watched. "Amazed, you just saved my music," she said, smiling. He replied, "Maybe music doesn't care who listens." For the first time, her eyes softened. Something invisible sparked between two worlds that were never meant to meet. It was the kind of moment that makes life dangerous because it makes hope look possible. It started with small moments, a smile shared between chores, a soft laugh behind closed doors. Every rule they broke was written in silence. Elena had everything, money, freedom, fame. But she never had peace. Arav had nothing, no wealth, no name. But he gave her peace. He'd fix her music stand, bring her tea when she studied, sneak in late-night letters under her books. "You make this mansion feel like home." One night, she waited in the garden with trembling hands. When he appeared, she whispered, "Do you ever wish you were someone else?" He smiled softly. "Only when I'm with you, because then I forget who I am." They sat under the old oak tree, moonlight spilling between leaves. It was the first time she touched his hand, and the first time he realized how fragile happiness feels when it's borrowed. But love in rich houses has walls thicker than hearts. One evening, the butler saw them together. By next morning, whispers floated through the mansion like smoke. The maid's boy and Miss Elena. Maria begged her son, "End it now, before it destroys you," but he just said, "If love destroys me, at least it was real once." That same night, he sneaked into the piano room one last time. She was waiting, eyes red, tears shining. "Promise me," she said. "You won't give up on us," he nodded. "Even if I have to walk 1,000 miles away, I'll still be beside you." Neither of them saw the shadow behind the door, her father's assistant, recording everything. Their secret had already become a weapon. The next morning, silence ruled the mansion. No music, no laughter, only the sound of power waiting to be used. Elena sat at the breakfast table, hands trembling around a porcelain cup. Her father, Richard Cole, read the newspaper like nothing was wrong, but she could feel it. The air had changed. When the butler placed a tablet beside his plate, Richard glanced at it, frowned once, and pressed play on screen. Her and Arav in the garden, holding hands. The sound of her laughter echoed like betrayal. Richard didn't finish his coffee. He stood up, said only 2 words, "Bring him." 10 minutes later, Arav was standing in front of his desk. Maria stood outside the door, begging silently with her eyes. Richard didn't shout. His calmness was terrifying. He took out a checkbook, wrote slowly, deliberately, and slid it forward. $1 million, he said flatly. "Take it and disappear from her life forever." Elena burst in. "Dad, stop." He didn't look at her. "You'll thank me one day." Arav stared at the check. His heart was breaking, but not for the money, for the look in Elena's eyes, the helplessness in them. He whispered, "You think you can buy silence with money?" Richard smiled. "Money doesn't buy silence, son. It buys distance." Arav clenched his fists. "Then you'll have to live close to your guilt." He tore the check in half, dropped it on the desk, and turned toward Elena. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "Not for loving you, but for thinking your world would let me." As he walked out, Richard finally spoke, cold and proud. "You'll regret this, boy." Arav didn't look back. "I already do." 10 years passed. The mansion that once towered over Arav's life now looked smaller, maybe because he had grown. He had walked out with nothing that day. No degree, no money, no father's name to hide behind. But he carried something stronger, humiliation that turned into hunger. He took any job that came his way, cleaning, repairing, fixing. He slept in workshops, studied at night under streetlights, built his mind brick by brick. Every rejection became a reason to move faster. Every insult was a lesson. Maria wasn't there to see it. She passed away quietly, her last words echoing in his head. "Forgive, but never forget." That became his rule. Years later, Arav founded a small tech firm, Zenitech Systems. It started in a one-room garage. Within 5 years, it was one of the fastest-growing startups in the country. And when the press asked him about his success, he smiled and said, "I just built what others said I couldn't." Meanwhile, Richard Cole's empire was crumbling. Bad investments, lawsuits, too much pride, too little trust. Elena had started working to save her father's company, but destiny was writing a poetic symmetry. One morning, she walked into a new office for a business deal. She froze. Behind the CEO desk sat Arav, older, sharper, untouchable. He looked up slowly and said, "Welcome to Zenitech, Miss Cole." Her voice broke. "It's Hugh." He smiled faintly. "You were right. Some things don't disappear, even for $1 million. The room fell silent. 2 worlds had collided again, this time on equal ground. Yahan Arav finally confronts the man who once bought his pain. Cinematic. Emotional, revenge-driven, 300+ words with full AI visual prompts for your scene setup. Outline 5, The Return, 340 words. 2 days after that meeting, the news spread like fire. Zenitech Systems had officially acquired Cole Industries. The same empire that once rejected him now belonged to the man it tried to erase. Richard Cole arrived at Arav's office with his usual arrogance, but this time, his pride was wearing cracks. He was older now, the kind of tired that even money couldn't fix. Still, he smiled like nothing had changed. "I suppose congratulations are in order." Arav didn't stand up. He simply gestured toward the chair. Richard sat down, scanning the luxurious office that once mirrored his own. Arav slid a document across the desk, an envelope with a check inside. "What's this?" Richard asked. $1 million, Arav replied calmly. "Exactly what you offered me 10 years ago. Only this time I'm giving it back." Richard frowned. Mockery doesn't suit success. Arav smiled faintly. "It's not mockery, it's closure." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Elena entered quietly, eyes full of emotion she couldn't hide. Her father turned toward her. "You knew about this?" She nodded. "He earned what you tried to buy." Richard looked back at Arav, voice softer now. "You've become me." Arav shook his head. "No, I became what you could have been if you ever chose love over ego." Richard stared at the check one last time. That same paper once symbolized his power, now his defeat. As he left the office, Arav whispered, "Money never disappears, but pride does." It wasn't revenge. It was poetry, written by time, signed by karma. Night fell over the city, golden lights blinking through skyscraper glass. Arav stood on the rooftop of his own building, wind brushing against the scars of his past. The world below was loud, cars, people, success. But inside him, everything was quiet. He pulled a small photo from his wallet. His mother, Maria, smiling faintly in her maid's uniform. "Ma, we did it," he whispered. but it doesn't feel like victory. Just peace. A soft voice came from behind. It was Elena. She had found him like she always did. Silently, in moments that mattered, she stood beside him, looking at the skyline. "You got your revenge," she said softly. He smiled weakly. "No, I got my life back." She turned to face him. "I never stopped loving you." He met her eyes for a moment. They were the same eyes that once begged him to stay. "Then love me enough," he said quietly, "to let me go." Her tears caught the moonlight. "Why?" she whispered. "Because forgiveness needs distance," he said, "and I'm finally ready to forgive." The city lights flickered as if the universe was exhaling with him. He looked at her one last time, smiled, and walked toward the elevator door. As it closed, she whispered through the wind, "You still play the piano in my dreams." He didn't turn back because some songs aren't meant to be replayed. They're meant to end beautifully. The old mansion was silent again. The same silence that once protected pride now echoed regret. Richard Cole sat alone in his grand office, surrounded by awards that no longer meant victory. The walls that once made him feel powerful now looked like a prison of his own making. He poured a drink, but his hand trembled, not from age and from guilt. His eyes wandered to a small drawer in the corner of his desk. Inside, folded neatly, was the torn check, the one Arav had ripped in half a decade ago. He picked it up, smoothing out its creases. For years he had kept it, not as proof of defiance, but as a reminder of everything he lost trying to control love. He whispered. He tore the check, but kept his soul. For the first time he saw himself clearly, not as a father protecting his daughter, but as a man terrified of losing control. He looked at Elena's framed photo on the desk, her smile still young, her eyes still full of hope. He whispered, "I was trying to protect you, but maybe I was protecting myself." He unlocked his phone and began typing a message. "Arav, I'm sorry for everything." His finger hovered over the send button, but he didn't press it, because some apologies can't travel across years. They have to live in silence. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, tears sliding down unnoticed. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, the same sound that once marked Arav's departure. This time, though, it didn't sound like anger. It sounded like forgiveness. Morning light slipped through the glass walls of Arav's penthouse, painting the room gold, the color of peace, not wealth. He stood near the window, watching the skyline that once made him feel small. Now, it just reminded him how far he'd come. But success didn't make him smile. Forgiveness did. On the table sat a single photo, his mother, Maria. He placed a white rose beside it and whispered, "You were right, Ma. Forgive, but never forget." He walked to the piano by the corner. It was the same one he had fixed years ago in that mansion, the same one that had started everything. His fingers pressed a few soft keys. The tune wasn't perfect, but it was honest. A gentle knock interrupted the music. It was Elena. She stood at the door holding a small envelope. Inside it, a note written in her father's shaky handwriting. He tore the check, but kept his soul. She looked at Arav through quiet tears. "He wanted you to have this." He smiled faintly, placing the note beside his mother's photo. "Then maybe he finally learned the same lesson I did," she whispered. "Which one?" He turned to her with calm eyes and said, "You can lose everything and still win, if you don't lose yourself." As she left, Arav played the final note. It echoed softly, like a goodbye and a beginning all at once. Money can build walls, but love always finds a way through them. Power can silence truth, but it can't erase what's real. In the end, it's not revenge that brings peace, it's forgiveness. Because the richest man isn't the one who owns the world, but the one who owns his heart.